That's right, everybody. It's that time of year, time to talk turkeys. Spring is upon us. The weather's getting nice. What a great time to be out in the woods. I love turkey hunting. Got my start in turkey hunting when I was 12. I was actually fortunate enough to harvest a bird my first year out, which doesn't always happen. A good friend of mine, Tom, got me out in the woods, and it's a lot of fun. There's nothing like hearing that first gobble early in the morning when you're a kid. So if you got kids and you want to get them into hunting, it's a great sport to get into, get your kids started. So today I just want to go over some basics in turkey calling, show you a couple clips and some of the things I like to do in the woods that work for me. Now, how do you pick the turkey call that you want to use in the woods? Well, great question. Really all comes down to practice and what you're comfortable with. I have a bunch of different calls here that I'm going to show you, and I carry a lot of them. Now I have a turkey vest that I actually used the last couple of years, which is great. I can fit plenty of calls in here. And the thing is, when you're in the woods, you're going to hear different birds, and one bird may sound more like a box call, so I'll have a box call with me. Other birds in the woods, like the hens, they might start sounding like slate calls, so I got various slate calls that I use. And then I always have a few mouth calls as well. There's a lot of real simple calls out there too, like a push and pull call, that are real simple to use. A lot of people don't like them because they are too simple, but the great thing about them is you can put one of them right by you in the woods if you're just sitting on a tree, and they're real easy to maneuver, and the turkeys can't see you. The thing you got to think about when you're picking that first call is, if I'm holding this call in my hand and I have a bird coming in, all of a sudden it holds up at 75, 80 yards, I have nothing as backup, well, what am I going to do? I'm not going to sit here and move this slate call around. That turkey's going to see me. So that's the one thing about turkeys. They do have really good eyesight, so you got to watch. First call I'm going to go over is the box call. I picked this call up, I think, for about 15 bucks at Walmart. You can get them just about anywhere, your Bass Pro or Cabela's. You can get box calls for pretty cheap, and then they range up to a little more expensive. The three main calls that we're going to talk about today is a yelp, we're going to talk about a cluck, we're going to talk about a purr, and then a little bit of cutting. So I guess maybe 4 calls. With the box call, I'm just going to show you a simple yelp, and you can actually call from both sides of the top. As you can see, there's chalk on the back side of this box call, and all I'm going to do is slide back and forth. This may take a little practice, but I just want to throw together 4 or 5 yelps, and it sounds something like this. From the other side, it may sound better. And that's just your basic yelp. You want to practice that a little bit. It's always a good idea to look up some turkey calls and get that sound down, or even spend a little time in the woods before the season. You can actually hear them calling. The cluck is real simple. All I'm going to do is just set the call down on one side, and I'm just going to basically pull up real quick. As you can tell, some of those are a little sharper than they should have been, but no turkey in the woods sounds perfect, so keep that in mind too. Another call that's really easy with the box call is just a real light purr, and all I'm going to do is just drag the top of the call to the bottom piece really slow. It sounds like this. That's not something you're going to want to use all the time, but if you have a bird hang up on you a little bit, you may want to do a little purr and maybe throw in some cluck, so it sounds something like this. As you can tell, you can be really nice and quiet with that call, and then you can get louder. So you kind of have to go on what the bird's doing. If you're hearing the bird calling back to you, you don't want to get too crazy with the call. But if it starts to hang up a little bit, maybe you want to call a little more. So you kind of have to mix it up, and you got to spend a little time in the woods so you can really know what to do. Next call I'm going to talk about is a slate call. And I got a bunch of different slate calls here, and they're a real basic call. Like I talked about earlier, though, when you're in the woods and you have a slate call, I want something that I can move to, that I don't have to make a bunch of movement if a bird's coming in on me. So slate call, to make the yelp that we talked about, is just real tiny little circles, and it sounds like this. You kind of have to find the sweet spot on the call. I had a friend of mine make this call for me, but you have to kind of find the sweet spot, and you want to experiment around on the top of the slate. So again, the yelp. For the cluck, all I'm going to do is put the striker right on top of the slate, and I'm just going to real quick do one of these numbers. So I'm just kind of snapping it off like this. And you may not like that sound, so like I said, I have different slate calls. This is the little deuce. This is a really cheap call. And it's a really decent call, actually. You know, if you want to get into turkey hunting, the great thing about it is you can pick up a call for 15, 20 bucks, get a couple different calls, get your permit for around 30 bucks, and you're out in the woods hunting. So great starter sport if you have a shotgun laying around and you want to get out there and turkey hunt. So a couple more sounds from this. Here's the yelp. So like I said, you may not like that Slate call, so I have a couple different Slate calls here. This is another one that a friend of mine made for me, and I've got several different strikers, so I'll just show you a couple of sounds on this one. Here's the yelp. Cluck. A purr, just dragging real nice and slow with the striker. And if I want to purr and then hit a little cluck at the end, so it'd be like this. Back to the yelp, just little tiny circles. Now, as far as when you call or how often you call, there's some rules of thumb. You know, if you get in a spot where you're close to birds that are roosting, you probably don't want to call a whole bunch. You don't want to call while they're up in the tree because they can tell where the sound's coming from. Turkeys have great eyesight and they really can hear really well in the woods. So it's not a bad idea if you hear them start to get rustle around and you know they're getting ready to fly down to maybe give a couple little clucks or maybe a real light yelp and let them know where you're at. But after that, you probably want to quiet down and wait till they get on the ground before you start calling. And then you kind of have to listen, try to decide which way the birds are going. Now, if it sounds like to me the birds are going away from me, I might get a little more aggressive with my calling and see if I can get those hens to come in, which naturally is going to bring the gobblers in, and that's my goal, to bring those big gobblers in. So if I can get a hen fired up and call her in, that's a great day. The last call I'm going to go over is a mouth call. And you can pick mouth calls up anywhere from $3 to $10 a piece. Mouth calls are a little bit tougher to use, I'm not going to lie. You have to practice. And I'm not going to go through all the different calls and exactly how to do it because that would be a 20-minute video. And I know you don't want to listen to a 20-minute video, but find a mouth call that's comfortable to you. And I'll go over the yelp real quick. So all I'm going to do is insert this, and it'll show you when you buy the mouth call which way to do it. But I want this part of the call to go up to the roof of my mouth and put that in my mouth like this on my tongue. And I'm going to push against the call with my tongue. And I like to move my hand around to kind of mimic sounds and kind of move the sound as well when I'm calling. That way it sounds like maybe a turkey's moving around and they're not just in one spot, as turkeys do. They never stop moving, very rarely. So here's a couple of sounds with the mouth call. Here's a yelp. All I'm going to do is push my tongue against the top of the call and practice a little bit, but here's what a yelp sounds like. And all I'm really doing is lifting my tongue up, and I'm almost kind of making a noise on the call. It's really hard to explain, but I'm like almost pushing the air into the diaphragm of the call and just making a real light yelp, like almost like a. And I'm doing that on the call. To make the cluck, I'm forcing air a lot faster, and it sounds like this. Usually I will pinch my mouth off as well. Like you can see my mouth is open when I'm doing the yelp. Watch when I do the cluck. You'll see in this video, you do need to be careful when you cluck, because it is an alert call for the turkeys. And I'm not doing that really hard. All I'm doing is, and I kind of pinch my mouth together. Sounds like that. Now with the call in. As you can see, I was moving around just like the turkey does. So I'm going to throw some yelps together with some clucks, and it sounds like this. And as you could hear, I messed up there when I was doing that. You have to practice. And you're going to mess up a little bit in the woods. Turkeys aren't perfect either. When they're calling, you will hear some really crazy noises. So you don't have to be super worried about it. As long as you're not doing it consistently, you'll be fine. So that's one of the mouth calls I like to use. Like I said, there's several different types. All I did with that was I did a little cackle and I sped up my yelp. And I can get excited and I can do all kinds of different calling. The great thing about mouth calls is, if you notice, when the mouth call's in, I'm not moving at all. So what I'll do is I'll have my mouth call in my mouth a lot of times, and I might have a box or a slate call like this. Once I get a turkey interested, then I can use my mouth call, hands on the shotgun, and I'm ready to go. Great thing about the mouth call is I can get really loud and I can get really soft, and that's another thing to think about. If you watch some turkey hunting videos, when that wind's blowing a little bit, it would really surprise you. You're 100 yards away. If your buddy's hunting 100 yards from you, he may not even hear you calling. So think about what the turkeys can hear. They do have really good sight, like I said, and they can hear really well. But you're 100 yards away and there's a little bit of wind. They might not be hearing you. So keep that in mind too when you're calling. But hey, I hope some of these tips helped you guys. Hope you get out this spring and try to shoot a big gobbler. Hope you get the kids out hunting. Make sure you make some comments. Let me know what calls you like to use, and if there's some suggestions you have for anybody that watches the video. We always appreciate the feedback. Thanks for tuning in to Hike Brothers Outdoors. Good luck this season.